Welcome to Always Authors, the literary podcast that presents two authors in candid conversation. On this episode, we are proud to present Peter Parnell and Rachel Cohen. Peter is an author and a playwright. He wrote the play QED starring Alan Alda, the stage adaptation for Cider House Rules, and the book for the Broadway revival of On a Clear Day You Can See Forever. Peter was a co-producer on The West Wing, and he co-wrote the multi-award-winning children's book And Tango Makes Three with his husband, Justin Richardson. Rachel is the author of Austin Years, a memoir and 5 novels, Bernard Berenson, A Life in the Picture Trade, and A Chance Meeting, American Encounters. Her essays have appeared in multiple publications around the world. Join in on this fascinating conversation about the intersection between art and time, how our current relationship to time is very bound up by tech, and the experience of being inside-outside of a character. Inspiration starts now.
Peter, it is so great to be here with you. It's just such a joy. Hello, Peter.
Same here, same here. Thank you so much for doing this. When the folks at Atomic Focus asked me to do this, and they said, "Look, it's a conversation, and just with whomever you would like to chat about." Whatever you'd like to chat about. The first, only person I thought it was you. And I knew you were, as we'll get into it, but I know you're in Berlin. But when I communicated with them, they said, that's fine, that's not a problem. And so I thought, fantastic. There isn't anyone I'd rather sit at the desk and chat with about anything really, especially about work, life, process, kids, whatever.
I feel the same. It's because we were realizing it's 30 years that we've been talking about work together, which is a really beautiful thing. And I feel in the last period, maybe since the pandemic, that our conversation about the work that we're doing has been really resonant and rich. So
I mean, we should tell the listeners probably just that we've known each other, as you say, for I think almost 30 years. Our families, I know you and met you originally through my husband, and our families often, I mean, in those 30 years that we've been through, we've met and hung out with many mutual friends, but also we've created families for ourselves, and our families often vacation together or spend part of the summer together, mostly on Cape Cod, although there was one summer also in Connecticut during the pandemic. And so what's fantastic is, for me, is that although you live in Chicago and I'm in New York, and although you get to visit and we occasionally visit, the summers are often a time in which we can reconnect over what we're working on, where we are, what our frustrations are, what our hopes and excitements are about whatever it is that we're doing. And in my case, in a few instances, I've also read to you when I've been working on plays, which I'm sort of working on a lot. I think probably when I was asked to do this, it's maybe because of my work with my husband, Justin, on the picture book And Tango Makes Three. And we can talk about that later, but that's not where most of my writing time is spent. So in fact, you're much more connected with that. And if we can talk about this a little bit later, but how is Berlin and what are you working on there?
Well, just to say also that that when you said that this project had come up and that we might talk together in an informal way as we do, it seemed like a wonderful chance. I'm in Berlin right now I have the Berlin Prize. I'm a fellow at the American Academy in Berlin, and it's a real moment. I have 6 months to kind of think about my work, move a new project forward. And kind of think through some ongoing projects that are present for me and continually being reworked, reinvented, which is something that we, I hope, can talk about, and we do talk about all those summers of these ongoing projects, your plays that you're working on, which often have a historical dimension,
Yeah,
and these
yeah,
essay books that I write that are always kind of thinking about interleaving the past and the present and kind of trying to understand
yeah,
the one through the other, both
yeah,
the present through
yeah,
the past and the past through the present. And so for me to get the unexpected boon of having one of those summertime conversations in the
yeah, certainly.
winter when I'm actually right in the
Nice.
thick of the kind of thing that I
Right.
often turn
Yeah,
to for help with,
of
it's
course, of
really,
course.
yeah,
Now,
it's
are you
pleasant.
there? Are you there with a group of writers? Is it, or I mean,
Yeah, it's a
I
class
know
of it's a
family.
class of fellows. Yeah, so there's like there are a bunch of people who write political theory, political history. There are some people. There's a novelist, a photographer, a composer. So it's a very rich, nice conversation that's going on, which is also very stimulating for me because a lot of what I do and what you do is work at the intersection of different arts. So
Yeah,
you have a play about Charles Darwin, you have a play about Stephen Crane, your
yeah,
plays are about novelists and scientists, and
yeah, yeah,
so you're kind of often looking from one discipline through many to many
yeah.
others, and that's also related to what I'm doing. So what I'm doing, to answer your question about my project here is it's called Time in Pieces, Artists at Work. And I'm trying to make these long strands of different artists who had reverberant sensibilities where you could sort of see the way that over time a similar sensibility kind of recurs. So I'm looking, say, the artist Claude Monet painting in his gardens in Giverny is also looking at Japanese woodblock prints, Hiroshige prints of gardens, and he owns those prints and he has them in his house and he's looking at them and then designing a Japanese bridge that looks like them and then he's painting that bridge. And then, like a contemporary performance artist like Jatavia Gary gets a residency, she goes to Giverny, she films herself on that bridge, and it makes these layers and layers of artists. They don't know each other, they didn't, but they kind of pass through the same
Right,
space, and you can feel the resonances in their
right.
work. So I'm trying to
You
make,
actually, yeah, I mean that you sent me there are two pieces that you've had done in the Yale Review that I assume are kind of part. Well, it's
yes, it's that
the
kind of work.
is one of them. I was sort of when we talked last week, a couple week or so ago, and you talked about it to me a little bit. I was sort of amazed at that. I hadn't realized that Monet and the war was so close to where he was painting, and that the work and the world of the flowers, the world of his home and his family, were right up against the noises and the sounds and what was happening outside that. Sort of incredible to think that they were both that they're both so closely allied, which I think her work sort of takes in more of because in terms of her talking about various of the moment, the violence, racial unrest. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that then is fed into the fact that it's almost sort of invades Giverny. It's sort of interesting.
Yes, I think that's right. Like her pieces were made. She had a residency in 2016, so that was like the moment when Philando Castile was killed,
Yeah, yeah,
and then and it was the election, that first election
yeah,
and period, and then she really did a lot of the work in 2019. So that was like on the way into the next round of turbulence that we've all been
right,
experiencing. So, yeah, her work is kind of surfacing violence that his work has kind of under the surface. And
right.
I think that's also very related to things that you and I think about in terms of how do you get back in history? Like, what's the right way to
Yeah,
move like an earlier historical moment in conjunction with what
yeah,
we know people are doing now? So, like, you're right, he was like, his gardens are like a mile from the front, or not, the mile's an exaggeration, but they're very close. You could hear artillery fire, and the ambulances would drive the wounded back from the front, like along
mm,
those beautiful Giverny gardens. So he'd be working there, painting those incredible water lilies. He had his son and his stepson at the front, and that was the experience. And so I gave a talk on that here, and a curator came up to me afterwards and she said, I've never really understood why when I walked into the Orangery, that space that Monet made that was supposed to be a space of peace after the war, like he painted those paintings with the idea that they would be a gift to France in the peace that he believed and hoped was coming. Right. She said, I just burst into tears. I'm a curator. I have a million art experiences. Only twice in my life have I done that. Just started to weep in a public space in that way. And it is because somehow it's under the surface there. It's like it's released, this experience that's there. And it's we're used to seeing those paintings as very beautiful, but there's something very difficult under them that makes them perpetuate. So, and I think Jatavia Gary could kind of feel that. She said to me when I interviewed her, this place needs a scream, like somehow the current version of Giverny that's like the gardens that are so perfect and so beautiful. She was like, it's got it, like I've got to somehow, like this place is behind glass. She said, I've got to release this, and she does scream in the video, both for the violence of our times, but also like for this sense that like this earlier artist was really on to something, like he was working on things that really mattered, and somehow that's gotten a little covered in glass, like it's museumified and it's not really alive.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Like I just have read your beautiful Stephen Crane play. I mean, it's just the most wonderful play. You sent me the latest draft. And I just am thinking about, like, how do you, that's also, it's like really the same time almost, it's 1899 to 1900. Exactly, Giverny in that time. Like, how do you think about that, like returning to that moment, bringing that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about because I just reread A Chance Meeting, which is an amazing book that you wrote and that was reissued maybe last year or 2 years ago. It's 20 years old, that book, and it's an amazing book that also so funny because in both your book, which is I guess you'd say are essays, and they're linked essays, a kind of braided series of essays about writers and photographers who may have met a number of times or maybe only met once, but as the book progresses, you feel this sort of cycle of time and the ways in which writers have influenced each other, whether they've known each other personally or not. It begins with photography, and it goes from Matthew Brady, up to Richard Avedon by the end of the book. And there's everybody's pictures. It always feels like people's are posing for pictures in a way. But but the book also you do this amazing thing, which is it's written with a lot of what I guess you'd call conditional and subjunctive approach in terms of beginning and ending each chapter in a sort of complete present way. So like I'm just grabbing it and looking, and it says, from the Mark Twain and Ulysses S. Grant, it was 4:00 in the morning, and Mark Twain had been up almost continuously for 5 days. He was writing a letter to William Dean Howells, and he paused to think back over the details again. And then you go in. And right from the beginning, although it's maybe this happened, or perhaps he thought this, or perhaps she felt this, it puts you into the head of a writer who is struggling with something or confronting something or thinking about somebody else. And almost in I assume what's sort of like a fictive way, but it isn't, because in fact the book has no dialogue in it. The quote, there are quotes. Whether it's letters, journals, comments other people made about someone, that's in there, and the facts are there, but there isn't dialogue, and yet you feel the presence of these people, these very creative people, right with you. And so, in fact, in a funny way, I guess because it's closer to fiction, but on stage, it's very present. You're in a present moment, and it's trying to find what's first on just dramaturgically, who wants what and what's being prevented, what are they being prevented from getting, who is or isn't in love with whoever else is or isn't on stage. But that presentness then is also fed in with dialogue that you have to find that's in a sense, your own language. But you do that without dialogue. And I know that in the past, I don't know now, but I know you've been also working on a novel. And I think that there's a way in which that combination of being inside, outside a character, being in their thoughts and then moving to their actions or what we see is just very wonderful when it's put against real people. I mean, people that we have read but maybe don't know as much about. So yes, I mean, just quickly about Jolly Cold World. I mean, I got started thinking. I think there was many years ago. Some of these plays take me a long time, and this play is like that. And I got interested in Crane, I think, through a biography that Linda Davis wrote many years ago called Badge of Courage. There's been a lot written since, but when I read that, there was a little piece about his last years and about his living in England with his common law wife and the writers who were living in the area that Crane, was staying. They were renting this enormous mansion, and he was living kind of like an English lord, or pretending to be, with absolutely no money. And he was not yet 30 years old, and he was living down the road from Henry James and Ford Madox Ford.
And H.G. Wells, this whole crew. Yeah. And
they had put on, in 1899 at Christmas, Crane hosted a 3-day Christmas event, which included a play that they wrote, a kind of nonsense play, a panto. And he asked all these writers to put in a line or two, and he and A.W. Mason, who went on to write Four Feathers, worked on the play together. And they performed the play, I think maybe only once. There are only a few pages of it that we have that are extant in the Columbia Library, University Library. And anyway, I got really excited about this idea, this crazy idea of these writers and their
making a play together,
husbands and wives making a play together. And so I started to work on Jolly Cold World, and it's taken me a long time back and forth to figure out exactly what the timeline is. And when I read it to you, I think it took place over the last year of his life in a number of scenes. Now it takes place over the last couple of months. I've sort of moved the action, compressed the action a little bit. But it's actually the same play. It's not gone through a lot of rewriting at this point. It's been much more about actually figuring out how to energize, or how to. I have a tendency sometimes to be interested in characters who aren't sitting in the driver's seat as much as they should on stage. They're probably a little passive, or they're reactive. I don't know why that it interests me, but it's antithetical to, in a sense, to drama. I mean, side characters can have that, but somebody has to want something. And I have to sometimes eke that out and go, oh gosh, how do I dramatize this particular state of mind or feeling that hasn't been expressed yet? Or and I think that in a sense, I need to, but it's a kind of Chekhovian aspect to the play. All of these characters are saying one thing and living in a certain way, but underneath there's all of this stuff that's roiling around. And so finding that has just taken me a while, but I do think it's a closer. Thank you for saying that, because I sent it to you.
I love it. I remember when you read it to me, because it was the pandemic, and we made this crazy cross-country journey, stopping nowhere in order to come to this house in Connecticut where you were staying, and we all masked ahead of time before, and then we were in one another's presence for this. It was just such a very strong experience, having seen virtually nobody for so long. And you read me that play, and it was like being at the theater, and of course nobody could go to the theater, and so it was an incredibly powerful experience, and stays with me always, kind of what that was. And the play was Chekhovian then too, like that's very much its atmosphere, and it's thinking about that, but it gets this iteration is so sharp in its consideration of like what it is to be a play, because he's writing a play and they're making a play together, so there's a play inside the play, and of course that's always a wonderful, it's like, Citizen Kane being about the movies, or Hamlet having a play inside it. It's a chance for the play itself to reflect on drama and the dramatic, and so it's really like, it's just, but of course you don't want to be self-conscious about doing that, but it just is so swift and sharp in its current version.
I think, thank you.
Yeah,
I think
so
I
good.
think it's getting there. I think it's getting there.
It's great. And I know we've talked about this, that part of the problem with making an energetic version of the past or something is that there's some motivations that are kind of perennial, like people are jealous and hopeful and, afraid of mortality, and those are things you just can be confident that Stephen Crane felt too. And you don't want to accidentally kind of shoehorn in some contemporary motivation that isn't like Stephen Crane might have cared about book sales, but he did not care about social media, or like his idea of celebrity was different than our idea. So there's some motivations that don't go back.
That's right.
And there's some furnishing, some research that is extraneous. You would do the research, but you don't want it in the thing.
That's right. I mean, that's right. I think if you're writing satire and you specifically want to, or it's part of your conscious or unconscious aim to sort of talk about something through the metaphor of history, which happens. I've done that in the past where, in a play like Romance Language, I wrote those characters are thrown together by me. You do that with a chance meeting, but in that they really were thrown together, whereas in Romance Language, I sort of make up a journey. And there are real characters and imagined characters. Huckleberry Finn is traveling with Walt Whitman, and they meet Emily Dickinson, and she has a lesbian affair with Charlotte Cushman. All of these characters lived, and she did not have a lesbian affair. And
Charlotte Cushman.
Didn't go to Custer's Last Stand. But that's a play in which the imagination and the energy of putting those characters together, knowing that they have there's a perceived idea of who they were enough that I can then say, but wait, let's put an almost contemporary spin on this, not to the point of using social media or something, but let's see what could have been going on underneath emotionally that allows me to create a plot that moves these characters forward. And that is different from saying, okay, I'm going to try to hew closer to what the actual events were, even though it's still not biography, and it's still not even a biographical play, which used to be written a lot. People used to write plays about the lives of whoever. I mean, I'm not putting it down at all. If you're writing, if you're Robert Bolt and you write A Man for All Seasons, then you are trying to find the dramatic through line of a story that you're telling that you are also trying to stick fairly close to, and that's craft, and it's good craft, and it's learning how to do that. And that's still different from saying, I think I want to talk more about whatever it is. How do writers create together or help each other, and how does somebody who's facing an understanding that life is ebbing and that he's not going to get far beyond the time he's in, how does that both hit a universal statement and yet also fit in historically with this particular character? I don't know if I'm making any sense, but so that was more of what was going on with what's happening sort of in the Crane play. And as you say, it still has to come down to a moment by moment thing. So money and making money for a writer, then, even though there isn't, as you say, social media, he knows, because he has the same agent who's in the play as H.G. Wells, he knows how many words, what it costs, how much Wells is getting paid to write per word.
Our
And he
word.
knows he's not on that level. And he
Yeah.
knows that Kipling is getting 20 cents a word,
Yeah.
whereas he's getting 5 cents or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that kind of research I love because
Yes.
that's so particular and specific. And I can put that on the stage and say, this play is about money as well as about writing and art
Yeah.
and publishing and death, frankly. And what do I do if I don't finish the book?
Yeah.
And so that all gets, put in there. Anyway,
Yeah,
uh,
completely. And then it's to the audience of your play to make the analogies and like to see, okay, I see how money is a pressure here, and it's similar but not quite the same as the way money is experienced now, and
yeah.
but it is powerful, and it's part of the story. I think, yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, part of what I'm trying to work on in this Time and Pieces project is thinking about like the sort of way that time feels different in different historical moments. That, I mean, of course, we're all experiencing time, but our relationship to time is like very bound up with what technology we have. So now we have everything divided into tiny little bits of seconds, like your phone is going off and the advertisement is
Yeah.
coming in, and everything is just infinitesimal little fragments of seconds. And Olympic races are won by 0.00067 of a second, and we accept that those tiny divisions of time, which really didn't even exist in 1900, like nobody could measure accurately that particle of a second, and
Yeah.
and like the Impressionist painters, they were working in this moment where time was changing a lot. Suddenly, people had watches that they carried with them on their bodies, like wrist watches didn't really start until like 1920, but people had time that they carried on their body, and they railroads coordinated time, so that instead of having like the church clock tell you what time it was, and that time being somewhat different in each town, like Rouen had a time and Paris had a time, and those weren't the same. But you couldn't do that with railroads because the trains would crash into each other. Like a train could not leave from Rouen and another one from Paris, and they had to be timed accurately. So you get like Greenwich Mean Time in 1884, and then time is coordinated globally, and everybody has to experience time not in
Yeah.
relation to the place where they live, but in relation to this global abstraction. It's a totally different way to live in time.
Hmm.
And we don't even think about that anymore because all our time is coordinated by satellites and GPS, and but that didn't used to be that didn't used to be the associate. So like I've been trying to think like something that seems as fundamental as time can feel quite different in different historical moments. And then how do you make that live so that somebody who lives in our time now can actually for a minute let go of the way time feels
Hmm.
to us right now and think like, how would that have felt? Like, what would that be? Can I even imagine
Yeah.
my body and my life and my space organized around a different sense of
Yeah.
time?
Yeah. Yeah. And yet,
Yeah.
and yet, you write, you've written about Joan Mitchell, and Joan Mitchell, I mean, very specifically, I know, talks about, a painting being the only art form without time. And
Like that's
do you
outside of
know?
time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I mean, that I see that in your characters too, this sort of yearning to get beyond mortality, I mean, that's just an eternal human
Yeah.
thing, to be able to make art that might somehow slip the bounds, and
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and call across to people in another moment or another place or another time.
When
Yeah.
you were, you've done these, well, people can go to your web, you did, I don't know if you're still doing the Frederick Project, that your work with painters and the way you look. I, you know, and Chance Meeting is a book that does this with traveling through the lives of all of these characters. And when you're doing it, you've done one sort of straight biography, right, of Berenson. And so in with that book, how, in a sense, you were slowing down time. I mean, you're really looking at one person's life. And was it of just a completely different process? It must have been. How do you, that's research that then goes into how do you interpret or put, I mean, it's not just, and then he did this, and then he did this, but he's also a unique character in a way because he was both, he was not an artist, but he was the great appreciator and authenticator and communicator about art to people. So it's a wonderful book that you write, and that living in Italy and that sort of world that he creates for himself is very seemed unique somehow, and yet you bring, there were all these people that were then being brought together by him or through him. What was it like to work on that? And did it affect or change how you thought about working with a historical character for a person?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. It in a way, it's a book. It's part of the Jewish Lives series at the Yale University Press, and so they had an idea of a fairly traditional biographical structure that starts early in the life and covers the whole life. And so I had less flexibility. Usually my books are really unusual in terms of how they hybridize different, how they have some nonfiction things and essayistic things and also imaginative things, or like my book Us and Yours had memoir and also literary study of her books and also biography. And so usually the fluidity of moving among those things is important to me. And I had less of that flexibility in that book. But I did come away with two things that remained really important to me. One was Berenson's actual way of looking, that he was a great looker at paintings. And it was very hard for me to reconstruct what that was like, because although he wrote about it and other people wrote about it, that's such a physical, immediate act, like standing in front of a painting and looking, and there's no film of it, and I don't even know if that would help. There's no way to know what that experience. So I spent a lot of time thinking, like, what is it like to have the most incredible visual memory and years and years and years of experience of spending hours every day looking at Italian paintings, and like go into a new space, see a painting you've never seen before, have an intuition about who must have painted it, assemble it into this huge encyclopedic vision of everything you've seen. Like, I have a dim sense of what that would be like, but that was a real act of imagination to just think about that looking. And I loved that, and I wanted to try to get that on the page for a reader, and that has remained like important to my own practice of looking at paintings. Like, I learned things about looking just by having to work out what he must have done, how he stood, got closer, farther.
I know that about you, and in fact, because I don't look, I have trouble with that, and I know you took me and Justin and our daughter Gemma to the Met once just to look at some Cézannes.
Yeah.
And I remember standing with you, and you just said, "Let's just look at this painting." And Gemma does paint, and she does she's been to Interlaken for a few summers, and she does printmaking, and she can look when we take her to a museum, and she can just focus in. And I was amazed because it is like you look and then things start to sort of happen to you and appear that I just don't take the time, even though I love to go to, say, museums, or there are painters that when I was reading I remember when I read the Berenson biography, there's even a chapter that says "Looking with Bernard Berenson." I thought, oh, this is "Looking with Rachel Cohen," which is fantastic. And I know what that's like. It's really a revelation.
That's very, very nice. Yeah, I remember two different occasions looking at Cézanne with you and Justin and Gemma at the Art Institute of Chicago, not so, some years ago.
Yes.
But also even earlier, going before our families, going with you and Justin to look at Cézanne at the Met.
Yes.
And just really, Yeah,
But I
like we
remember those
got to
trees. I think Gemma was there. Maybe she. I remember a painting of his of
a,
trees that
yeah.
I can't more than that. I can see them in front of me actually. But
Yes, yes. I remember that we got to a point where we actually could almost like see the light intensifying on the
yeah,
building. Like Suzanne
yeah,
paints this building
yes,
and
yeah,
there's like it all you can almost see the light move as you like
yeah,
the longer you look at it. And that
yeah,
was kind of wonderful. And for me too, although I can do that. I've spent many different hours with different paintings. A lot of my looking is very fast. Even like I'm here in Berlin, I'm trying to absorb hundreds and hundreds of paintings that I haven't seen before. I go with my iPhone, I take very quick photographs, I spend a few minutes, and then maybe later that night, maybe 5 years from now, I spend a lot of time looking at those images. But it's a weird kind of broken and delayed looking. But that special looking of just sitting and dropping everything, that's really also, I have had not that many experiences like that with other people. That was really wonderful. I was going to say, I mean, you have this play about Thomas Eakins that you've also been working on for a long
yeah,
time. That's a
yeah,
play that's about painting and painting with other people, which is
yeah,
also a shared preoccupation, I think, of yours and mine, of kind of like what it is about creativity that's among people, not only like the writer alone in their room, but the like, a shared experience or one that goes back and forth between people. And I think
yeah,
of that as both being like our temperaments and mindsets about other people, but also you work in the theater, it's a collaborative form.
yeah,
You're often thinking about what it is to make with other people, and that you mentioned that as being a theme in the Crane play, and I see it also in the Aikens
yeah,
play, also in the Darwin play, in a
yeah.
lot of your work. The and it can be vexed too. Sometimes it's envious or competitive, but
That's
it's
right.
like
That's
it's
right.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Akins, I got interested in the academy and the the fact that the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts that the teaching that went on there, and that there was a kind of what that meant for young men and young women to be looking at and doing figurative drawing and painting, and that the sort of rise of the academy there and other places as influenced by the French and by European artists and Akins's background doing that, having trained over there, and I just got interested in the school aspect of it. It's a play that I have not found the center of it has moved around over time. It's probably the most problematic thing that I've worked on in the past few years, partly also because I felt it was speaking to a certain moment when I was first writing it, and then that moment has sort of gone. And so then with a play, you have to look and say, well, why the hell am I, like, does this still have a reason to be? And sometimes I feel like I've gotten it, and sometimes I feel like, oh, the time isn't quite right, and I have to either find it again or let it go. And this has been a time for me of several projects like that where I'm sort of going back and forth and saying, okay, now let me look at this, and now let me let me look at
Yeah.
that. But it's sort of actually funny, I think, because I knew I was going to talk to you. But I just got a notice of an exhibition from Bill Scott of exhibit of his that's happening in New York. And I remember when I met him through you, a wonderful painter. And I remember when I went up to his studio, and he showed me how he just painted for me a little bit, and it was not dissimilar because he actually went through to several canvases at the same. He like put a
Yeah.
dab here and a dab there, and and it's sort of similar. Like on a certain day of the week, I'll go and okay, I'm going to go back to this and back to. Of course, if I have something coming up, hopefully like a workshop or a production, but a workshop especially because I like to work with actors and directors on the way to finding what a play is. So then I have a little bit more of a deadline, and I go, okay, I've got to like get this out, figure it out, for now, what it is. So, but yeah, the idea of a group of people or artists working together is always intrigued me, and maybe because
Yeah.
it is, because I come from a collaborative background in a sense. But yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I think what you say about like there's something, there's, I think of it as like almost this long, like kind of periodicity or something. Like there's a project and you're kind of carrying it forward, you and I, whoever, and, and it's got, it's got these different meanings and metaphors and characters and some story, and it kind of, it's just amorphous enough that it can kind of become different thing. It can kind of shift. It can, you can
Hmm.
have, it can be 7 characters. It could be 12 characters. I know you've done both of those versions, or that
Yeah.
novel that I worked
Right.
on for so long. It could be, it could be in the first person. It could be in the third person. It could be like,
Yeah.
there's so many different ways, and you sort of have to plumb them fairly fully to find out how much. And at the same time, there's another periodicity, which is like the history, your own life, the things that are happening, and those
Yeah.
are in some kind of complicated relationship. And so you're sort of trying to get like these different sine waves or something to, I'm waving my hands, which nobody who's listening to this will be able to
Yeah.
see,
No. No. No.
to kind of coincide or intersect or reach some point.
Yeah.
And it becomes different, like times change. Like I started writing my book about Austen and Jane Austen and my own memoir experience, partly because my father died and it was an intimate part of grieving for me. And then, but then like there was the 2016 election and we moved to Chicago and history became really different. And then like that book somehow had to be shifted to deal with that history. Like it couldn't be a book of 2014 anymore. You can't publish in 2020 a book that really belonged to
Mhm.
2014. It kind of has to
Yeah.
shift again. But it turned out that Austen was much more complicated and political and aware of history, and her
Mhm.
brothers were abolitionists and they were sailing to catch slave ships. And it turned out that her work was much more relevant to my present than I had understood. Like in the
Yes.
end, that became
Yeah.
the strength of the book. But it took years to figure that out. Meanwhile, history is still changing. So
Yes. But
it's a very
yeah.
complicated process.
Yes,
Yeah.
although that you mentioned it, Austin Years is a book. I mean, it's a beautiful book, and that's where like a chance meeting, that you're in a chance meeting in terms of the way in which it's a cool way in which you're able to, you're there, but you're not there, and somehow, and then you have the Berenson book, which feels more to me like a strict or
I'm out of that one. I'm not in that one. Yeah.
biography. And then Austen Years, you come to that, and you're in that book, and your father is in that book, and you're in your family, and you become a mother in that book, and your first child is born, and meanwhile you're reading and rereading Jane Austen, and it's a memoir, but it's also about her and about how she came to write what she wrote, and it's very personal. And reading it, and knowing your father as I did, not incredibly well, but enough to
Yeah.
feel the joy that he felt in the work that he did, in the works of others that I mean, he came to my every play of mine that he could,
Yeah.
it's so that, and the book is just imbued with that. It's filled with that love, and it's filled with that, the way in which literature can help get you through something, or can, yeah. So it's interesting because it is a combination. I mean, it's very personal, and I don't know, not to, we're finding the strands that are similar, but in any of these things with a play, you have to find the personal, even though it's not I did this or I did that. Otherwise, why are you putting it on the stage? It's not about you, but on some deeper level, it is. I mean, I remember when I worked on Trumpery on this play about Darwin and Wallace, I was very interested in Wallace because wasn't Darwin, and he isn't known as the author of the theory of natural selection in the way that Darwin is, of course. But there's what that is, but then of course, why was I interested in it? And when I finished a first early draft of it, Justin said to me, "Well, they were inhibited narcissists." I mean, Justin's a psychiatrist, and you're an inhibited narcissist, so of course you're interested in who won. It's the theory of it's survival of the fittest, and both of these English guys, these British geniuses were grappling with competition and grappling with who's got priority, and it's like the money thing with Crane and what how much are you being paid. It's both and it's also loving the thing. I mean, with Berenson too, in a different way, it's loving the art and it's also wanting to make money from the art.
And being able to see both that Darwin play also is a really strong current about being a father and thinking about children and mourning for children, and I think that's also something that's in a number of your works in very different ways. Like sometimes it's a way that you come to understand the character from something that you've thought about in your own life. Sometimes, like in Papa Hot, Dada Woof. Have I got the right order of that? I always like that's much more at the foreground, the kind of question of like being a parent, or like in And Tango Makes Three in the children's book. Of course, that's part of what makes the beautiful poignancy of that book is the kind of way that you and Justin thought about becoming parents. That's in the penumbra of that book.
That's right. I mean, Justin and I were in the process of figuring out how we could become parents at the time that we were, read that article in the New York Times about Roy and Silo and Tango and the Central Park Zoo, and we thought it would, I mean, that was that was right. That was our life at that point, and at this time we were, enough as writers, Justin, who writes as well, said there's not been a book out there that has talked about two mom or two dad or single parent families, and here's a way of talking about that without without beating people over the head with it not as an issue.
Picture book. It's a beautiful metaphoric story for children. It's such a beautiful book, and we've also said, I know I've said to you that part of what I think made that, I mean, that book is one of the most banned books ever. It's banned every year. And it's also one of the most loved and reread, and it's a tender and beautiful book for many, many children growing up. And part of what made that book so timely, I think, is that you do have this sense for the historical moment, that's such a part of your work of thinking what does this moment mean to history, and how do I catch it among a group of characters, which is just what that book does.
What
your plays do. And I just find that, I think that's it's just really it's amazing, and the kind of part of what you're trying to catch is the relation of that moment to itself. And then once you can see that, then you can make a play or a story about it that people could read at any point, it's Schubert work for piano is in perfect relation to its own moment. And you can't write like Schubert now. It sounds anachronistic and bad and imitative and whatever, but it's like in its own, it's in its relation. And so when you're doing a historical piece, you somehow are still in that, you have to figure out its relationship to its moment and your relationship to your moment, and somehow have those things both working. And then it can be forever, and people could read it at any point. And so the Stephen Crane play is set very much in 1899 as it goes to 1900, but it feels like it could be the precipice of any new moment, like whenever... for us too, you're just about to go across into the next thing. And is it success or is it death? It could be either one. And you're So I think it's really, anyway, that Tango book is it's like a beautiful small version of many of the things that we're talking about,
Yeah,
for
I guess
other
that's
work.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting because I, of course, yes, there's, yeah, I mean, that book has been we've had so many, we've met so many extraordinary people because through that book, and as it continues to make its way through the courts at this point, we'll see what Tango is trying hard, along with a number of other books and a lot of other authors, to make sure that the books stay on library bookshelves. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and you've done a lot of work with librarians too, and just in thinking about that, and I'm really glad that you do that work, and it's related, this sense that there are all these different ways to care about the arts and literature, and all these different
yeah,
kinds of people and kinds of professions that are necessary. You need curators, and you need students, and you need librarians, and you need
that's right.
um, playwrights and actors and set
Yeah,
designers and
yeah,
all of it to make these things. Yeah, and that's a real goes on being an inspiration to me. Like as I try to think about just expanding the bounds of what nonfiction can do, kind of trying
yeah,
to stretch across, like and evoking these different things. Like I'm definitely talking to a lot of curators right now, and
mm,
that's like a very, very rich way of thinking about kind of what, is nonfiction like collecting? Is it like exhibiting? How can I kind of reorient what I think I'm doing in the
yeah,
nonfiction realm? Yeah. Yeah, I think, sadly, I think we have to continue this conversation mostly, not on the podcast,
yeah, yeah,
um, but it's just gives me so much pleasure to think about these things. And I
yeah.
guess the last thing I was just going to ask you to think about with me is just like it's kind of the research process, or maybe even just like where you are, like now when you sit down at your desk, like where are you in this moment? Like what kind? Because we both have like there's research days, there's writing days, there's reading days, there's
Yeah,
business days,
yeah.
um, but like where, yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, if I'm working on a play and I'm actively rewriting, and mostly it's rewriting for me because the most joyful part is a first draft because I'm playing around. I don't really necessarily know where a play is going to go. And yet then once I get through a draft, then it's like, what am I really writing about? It's like,
mm-hmm.
and how do I make that better? But if I'm actively, and I'm working on a play right now that has been workshopped. It's been read a couple of times by, I wrote one, it's a small play, and it's four characters. And one of the characters I wrote a specific actor, and she's going to do it, and we've been workshopping it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a case where, lo and behold, the director I'm working with, after our last workshop in December, said to me, I don't know if you need this one of these characters. It's only four characters. And that's very radical to say, well,
Yeah,
wait a minute, maybe it's only three characters, and take that character and put him off stage. And I'll try anything. I mean,
yeah,
I'll try anything. And then I always think it's going to only take a week, and it doesn't,
yeah.
I have to really think it through. And I'm very lucky that I have you, and I have my friend Keith, and I have my
Mm-hmm.
friend Daniel, and I have Justin, and I sometimes read aloud, as I did with you. I read sections of plays aloud so that I can get a sense of, because I did that starting when I was first starting to write. I went to the O'Neill conference, and you read your play aloud if you were selected to the other playwrights, and I found it really great because I just get a different sense. It's coming out of my mouth. It's not from just in my head. So I've been working on taking this 4-character play and seeing if it can work with 3 characters. And it's kind of driving me crazy because I've read it aloud now to Keith, I've read it to Daniel, I've read it to Justin, I've read it to my director. And because it's set in it is about more in the world of music, I have an advisor who's a wonderful pianist, and I'll probably read it aloud to him. And I have I'm a little bit, literally, I wake up and in the day, I'm like racking it's like, what do I do? What do I do? I will sit with the actors, the 3, not the 4, and we'll sit around a table and see if it actually can work that way. I have enough faith in my director that I want to try it, and say, oh, okay, what does this do? Maybe that is better. I don't know if it's just me being slow, if it's me not knowing what I'm doing, but that's sort of how I work. So that's really where I'm at, literally, at the moment. I'm much happier trying to problem solve than but the writing in this structuring of something in my head, whether it's going from 4 characters to 3 or it's a new idea, living with that, what that's going to turn into, living with the idea of creating a dramatic structure, a way of dramatic action is leading usually to a first draft. And in a way, this is like a first draft, even though I'm going back, I've worked on it. That's the most sort of exciting. And you mentioned a few minutes ago, like, is it, for me to figure out, is the play set over 2 weeks? Is the play set over a weekend? Is the play set over 2 years? What happens if this character is taken out? What does it do? Those kind of almost formal structural questions are it's funny, that is what turns me on the most, aside from being in rehearsal and seeing it and working with the actors and directors, is really playing around with problem solving. It's kind of like a thought experiment, a dramatic thought all the time of what can I do? How can I make this more dramatically worthy? Anyway, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And are you working on a time essay for this collection?
I'm trying to write a kind of introductory essay that I'm liking, that has a lot of different artists and kind of shorter pieces. I'm thinking about poetry. I want something of the kind of density of poetry. But I'm also thinking about some larger structural things for the book. And then I'm trying to do research because there's artists here in Germany. Either there's some living artists who are in Berlin, and there's also historical artists like Paula Modersohn-Becker and Ruth Duckworth, whose work I can learn more about while I'm here. So I'm also like kind of out gathering. So that's a very nice combination of like trying to do some of the larger structuring things, which I also love and can do endlessly. And also just absorbing and trying to really pay attention and live very fully here, which is exciting. So it's a good vigorous
in what looks like a fairy tale house to me.
Yeah, it's a cottage, and it looks very Middle European, these kind of slate roofs.
Yeah. It's as always, it's a pleasure. I will, I guess, leave it here for now for our listeners. You and I can carry this on for on and on. But thank you so much for engaging with me on this, because it's been really nice to talk about
our work together. I've loved it. I love talking with you. Yeah. All right. So I think that concludes it. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Always Authors for having us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. Please visit alwaysauthors.com to learn about our other episodes. Always Authors is an exclusive production of Atomic Focus Entertainment.